the Diplomatic Corps, Your Excellencies, my husband and I were looking forward to welcoming you this evening to the Royal Palace in Bucharest, a place which, in one shape or another, has been the centre for Romanian life for over a century of our nation's modern existence. The tradition of this encounter with the Diplomatic Corps in the heart of our capital city, which goes back to the days of Carol I in the 19th century, was revived by my late father after the fall of the communist dictatorship. Unfortunately, and for reasons known to you all, it proved impossible for us to meet in person tonight. However, I am determined to continue upholding this tradition today and into the future, even if we must communicate remotely. When we met in December last year, I spoke with pride about the completion of the first Romanian presidency of the European Union. It was a major test for the diplomats of our country, and one which I hope you will agree Romania passed with flying colours. But none of us knew at the time, or could have possibly predicted, the devastating scale of the pandemic which has hit us during this year. It has been a difficult year for all of us. And although vaccines are coming, thereby opening a chance to end the pandemic, few people will doubt that the coming year will also be a difficult one. Not only will we have to ensure that our most vulnerable citizens are protected, but we must also nurse our economies after the heavy damage inflicted on them during this year. There are, to my mind, a few lessons to be drawn from this experience. The first is, of course, that of national resilience, of building up our ability to respond to major crises of this kind. I hear people say that somehow the coronavirus pandemic has proven that we do not need to spend resources on our armed forces, but must devote instead our expenditure to our health services, that threats do not come from without, but from within. I'm afraid that I do not accept this supposed distinction. Yes, the pandemic has exposed shortcomings both in our administration and, tragically, in our health services. But no, we could not do without our armed forces and our other forces of law and order. In effect, we faced both a darkened horizon overseas and a very difficult situation at home. We need protection from both. So the role of our armed forces and their importance remains as undiminished as that of our doctors and our nurses. Unquestionably, it is the case that greater resources need to be allocated to our health services. But the key to our challenge is good governance. That is the route which unlocks better economic development, which in turn provides enhanced national revenues and better investments in all our services. It is this, rather than philosophical debate about where we should devote our attention, that is to me the most critical lesson from the current crisis. Your Excellencies, my family and I wish to express our deepest respect and admiration to the personnel of our national and emergency services, to the doctors, nurses, and other frontline workers who fought and are fighting this pandemic. I also wish to convey my gratitude to the tens, if not hundreds of thousands of Romanians working abroad throughout Europe and beyond, who have contributed to the national health services of other nations during the current pandemic. I know how appreciated they are and how vital their contributions have been. But this year also reminded us of the importance of belonging to the European family. For we, the Romanians, could never have managed the challenge which faced us this year on our own. Our transformation into the country we are today could not have been accomplished without the support of the two institutions which continue to underpin our prosperity and security today, namely the European Union and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It was the European Union which stepped up with its various credits and loans, as well as broader recovery programs. After years of debating the supposed limitations of our financial arrangements, our nations agreed to set their reservations aside and to join in the reconstruction efforts. As the English would say, a friend in need is a friend indeed. The European Union has not only endured the pandemic and one of the most severe economic downturns since the Second World War, it has also moved with speed and dedication to confront the challenges of reconstruction which face us in the future. It is equally important to note that, as we turn to reconstruction, we also turn to the broader project of ensuring that the European continent remains one, whole and free. For we are not just a big market, we are also a community of values, and these values must be upheld. The growing political differences between the old member states and the newer ones is worrying. It is not for me to comment on the affairs of other countries, but it is, I think, the responsibility of every Romanian to point out that these disputes weaken all of us. Personally, I would like to hear as little as possible about the so-called Eastern or Western Europe. We have one continent of shared responsibilities and values, and we must all respect all of them. This is not a restaurant menu from which we can pick and choose the items we find most convenient or most appealing. I must also pay tribute to NATO, our joint military alliance, which remains the bedrock of our security. We only need to look at the recent military clashes in countries adjacent to the Black Sea to realize why NATO continues to be needed. I am proud of the contribution our nation has been making to the alliance. We are doing so not just because we accepted our pledge to spend 2% of our gross domestic product on defense, and not just because of our American allies who are asking us to spend more. We are contributing more because we believe this is for our own security. And when it comes to our regional security, I would like to extend warmest wishes to Maia Sandu, President-elect of the Republic of Moldova, our closest and most intimate of neighbors. Her victory is not only a triumph of principles and morality, but also a victory for women everywhere in the region, a courageous step towards better governance. I am sure that Mrs. Sandu will find no better supporter of her country than Romania. And if I am asked whether Romania has some sort of hidden agenda in Moldova, I always reply yes. Our agenda is to see a prosperous Moldova able to decide on its own accord and without any foreign interference about its future destiny. Ladies and gentlemen, to those members of the diplomatic corps who represent nations outside Europe, I wish to reiterate our country's global vision, as exemplified in our active participation in the United Nations and in other world organizations. I know that much has been said about the so-called end of globalization, but we only need to look at the current pandemic to realize that we are more interconnected than ever. A problem which starts in one corner of the world can hit all of us. The same applies to the global challenge of the climate crisis, which affects us all and our future generations. This issue requires a global responsibility and demands a greater commitment from each one of us. In the coming year, I will continue to strengthen the role of the Romanian Crown as a national unifier and consolidator, as a compass of our global vision, and one which my family and I remain determined to support and enhance. Please join me in raising a virtual toast to the friendship between Romania and your countries, and hopefully to a much better new year.
Majestatea voastră, formatul răspunsului meu scurt la salutul majestății voastre este complet special anul acesta, marcat de catastrofa mondială cauzată de infecția virală COVID-19, care a provocat și continuă să provoace atât de multă suferință. Cu toate acestea, este vorba de o abordare plină de speranță, din moment ce este caracteristica și misiunea ființei umane să depășească provocările și să stăpânească peste tot pământul. În calitate de decan al Corpului Diplomatic, am plăcerea de a mulțumi și în numele tuturor colegilor mei acreditați la București, dintre care unii au sosit însă după întâlnirea noastră de anul trecut și, prin urmare, nu au avut oportunitatea de a participa la reuniunea noastră anuală tradițională și a de face acest lucru nu numai pentru cuvintele pe care ni le-ați adresat, ci mai ales pentru serviciul pe care îl desfășurați în România în beneficiul întregii societăți și în contextul cooperării internaționale. Întâlnirea virtuală de astăzi, pe lângă evidențierea bunelor relații care există între familia Regala și statele pe care noi le reprezentăm, sublinează tocmai voința comună de a coopera în promovarea culturii și dezvoltării integrale a nobilului popor român, care nu și-a pierdut credința într-un viitor mai bun și speră să înceapă cu un reînnoit elan de îndată ce se va depăși actuala pandemie. În numele tuturor colegilor mei diplomați, permiteți-mi să reînnoiesc majestații voastre și întregii familii regale cele mai bune urări de serenitate pentru acest Crăciun și pentru tot anul 2021. Crăciun fericit, un an nou fericit, la mulți ani!